Hi, everybody. Welcome. Well, thanks for making it up here to the data engineering stage. I've been telling everybody that it's either a welcome break from the busy show floor or, kind of a Siberia experience. So I'm not sure how you're liking it, but thanks for making it up here. And welcome. So I'm Matt Turner. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Prophecy. We're the Data Transformation Copilot. And it's not going to be a shock today that we're going to be talking about data transformation. But I think it's a really big, important part of the big data story. Getting all the data that we've been putting together over the past, as long as this journey's been, but now with data cloud platforms, putting them together, getting all that data together and into the hands of all the smart, talented, but maybe not so data-centric people that need to put into action. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the impact of that on one of the more interesting areas of banking, but maybe in tech, which is this new modernization that's happening in wholesale banking. But before we get into that, I want to actually just take a minute and talk about big data itself. So I'm somebody that's been doing this long enough so that I once worked for a company that we had T-shirts made up that said, "We were big data before it was big." And like maybe some of you in the room, I have the 3 V's from Gartner kind of burned in the back of my head. Variety, velocity, and volume of data. And that story, that this approach to data, this reality of data was going to break the traditional data sets, data management principles. And to some extent, that's the journey that we've been on. It really kind of went that way. You could not simply put into your on-premises relational database the massive amount of growing and variety and volume of data. And so, we had things like Hadoop, adopted NoSQL, went into lakehouse technology. Then we've got, I already went past that. I meant data lake. I'm using lakehouse like it's there, but data lakes around, and then lakehouses, and eventually where we are now with cloud platforms. And looking back on it, those 3 V's, and I never know if I got them in the right order. Does anybody actually know the right order from Gartner? Does anybody even know what I'm talking about with the 3 V's? All right, so who thinks, there's some head nodding. So does anybody get a guess on the order? Because I don't know. So anyways, volume, variety, velocity, whatever it was, the answer is probably yes, because it was any order. That's actually the journey we've been on. And then in the recent part of that journey, though, I think we've just been thinking about it as data. I know that we're at Big Data London and this conference has been going on, but most of the conversations have been about data. And I think that for people part of that journey, that's where we were, sort of building and thinking about data until about 2 years ago. And can anybody know what happened 2 years ago? In the fall, November specifically? This is when ChatGPT was released. So Gen AI comes onto the scene. And it's really been transformative for everybody working in data. But specifically for big data, it's kind of like we're back. All of a sudden, this is the conversation. And so I wanted to actually start there and just talk a little bit about how the impact of what we're going on, what we're seeing, but that connection between data and AI, if it hasn't been hammered home enough for you yet, I'm just going to go through it. And I actually want to start with something from before the Gen AI era from Tom Redman. So Tom Redman is a data doc, writes a lot of great stuff. There's a great Harvard Business School article, lays out this high bar. And when you're doing a talk like this, it's really great to find like the article that says exactly what you wish it would say. So his title is, "If your data is bad, your machine learning tools are useless." Can't put it any other way. And it really lays out this great high bar. Well-governed, accessible, and even democratized data. Great example. So I actually ran into Tom this last fall when I was giving a talk in Boston and said, "Hey, I'm going to talk about your article." He said, "Oh, that article. If I was writing it today, I'd update it. I'd update it to say, if your data is bad, your machine learning tools are scary," which I think is great. And maybe even more. If your data is bad, your Gen AI tools are scary. All right, so we're establishing it. But the flip side of this is that there's been a lot of attention. So if you're not familiar with Randy Bean, he does a great survey talking about data leaders. And in this year's survey, in the prologue, he just says, look, we talk to CDOs and they say that they're the belle of the ball. Everybody wants to talk to them. It's finally coming. And think about the word on big data, we're finally here. And the flip side of that is that everybody's investing in data. So 87.9% say investment data is top, and data and analytics is top priority for their company. Now, I like to pull a lot of stats and talk about this thing. And lately, there have been a lot of those kind of 90% stats. And I'm always thinking, like, what are those other 10% doing? Like, nah, it's not for us. But anyways, when you get to 90%, it's really saying something. And maybe that's because, as Annie Slipsky said, this is reInvent this last year, Gen AI strategy is data strategy. We're in the right room. It isn't like this is something separate. And I thought this was great. And this is kind of how I went into this year, thinking about the fact that we're all working on the same project. And I thought that it's a great way to kind of frame the journey we've been on with big data, but also the work that we're now embarking on, which just maybe it's another chapter. And in fact, maybe that's the reality that, so Adam Conway, I'm sorry, I know it's super small, but you guys can see the slides and I'll make sure people have links to all this stuff. Adam Conway wrote an article right after the Databricks Summit, and he said, big data is back, and it's more important than AI. Well, we'll see, right? We'll see. But it's nice to be here. It's nice to talk about it. And so that's what I'm going to, sort of launching from there, we're going to take a look at what's going on in our corner of the world, which is about data transformation. And what's going on is all of that activity is putting a lot of pressure on everybody working in data. I mean, more is needed by everyone. So if you kind of look at this bottom stack here, the things that we're working on, business intelligence reports, that's our bread and butter. We always were supporting machine learning, but all of a sudden, this big attention's being turned with, and we were just having a conversation at lunch about Gen AI. It's not, hey, what great things can I do with Gen AI? It's, how can I not be those guys that made that bad mistake with Gen AI? We're going to use it, but what can we do? But there's still a lot of pressure. And that means addressing in the kind of middle layer even more data. And in the big data world, that's what it's about. So going beyond the structured data, semi-structured and unstructured, we all of a sudden have to address this in the same kind of very enterprise and rigid way that we've been dealing with structured data, because it has to make sense of it. And what's going on is it's putting a lot of pressure on the users. Everybody at the top, I'm going to roughly say it's probably some of you or most of you are in one of these roles. Data engineer is oversubscribed. Everybody wants what they've got. I want access to that big data cloud. I want you to build me that pipeline. And everybody downstream, data scientists, data analysts, they're blocked, waiting for data, struggling. And this is kind of where we are with this particular part of the world. And the reason we're here is that when you go to the cloud platforms, you're kind of faced with two paths. You can make things fast and use a lot of the tools that are out there with data transformation, but they're siloed. They're locked in and they're taking the data. And in some cases that's expensive, but the real thing is they're not taking advantage of the full cloud data platform. Or you can fully embrace cloud data and do it yourself. And you're linking together all these tools. And it's kind of on you to work out how they work. But not only that, it's on you to provide those high levels of skills that you need, that everybody is working on. And it's almost like, and kind of coming back to the world of big data, it's almost like there's one of these iron triangles. So if you remember from the big data world, CAP theorem. Does anybody know about CAP theorem? Consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. You can only have two out of those three. Well, maybe there's something else going on in this world. You can have intuitive and powerful, but it's not going to be accessible to everybody. Or you can have intelligent, intuitive, but it's not going to take advantage of the cloud. And that's the kind of the world we're in, where we're balancing these things with, making these hard choices. And like everybody in the room, we've all been impacted by what's happening with Gen AI, and copilots are kind of breaking through this and changing the landscape. So Microsoft Copilot is kind of the originator here, or actually, I'm sorry, so it's a GitHub Copilot, because it was really GitHub. And you can see something, these dramatic changes. 55% more efficient. And that's actually, I went and looked at that stat. That's not the same person doing the job. It's a novice can be 55% more efficient than an expert. This is really dramatic stuff. And that's happening everywhere. So what if we applied that into our world? What if we took that into this data transformation world? And that's what we've done with Prophecy. We're here to be this productivity layer for everybody working in the data, but kind of breaking through that boundary of those three different things: intuitive, powerful, and intelligent, put in one platform. And the big thing about Prophecy and our orientation is that it's for the data users. It's for the people using the systems. So the data engineers, data scientists, data analysts have a tool that's tailored for them. Our founder, Raj, does this great. We had him on an interview at the Databricks Summit, and they were talking about, what are you doing? He just took a big pause and said, but the users, who's thinking about the users? All the data platform tools are all about the capabilities. And this is actually coming at the human level and solving the problem there. And we put that into action. We've got this idea that anybody, so visual is a great way to communicate complexity, and that's what we're about. We're about taking a visual tool, but still bringing along the complexity and the necessary power of code, and the Copilot idea, solving problems for people before they know they have them. So we have an idea of promptless AI. The interface kind of works with you, or doing the animation there is responding to a text, giving the top 50 customers by amount, and it'll actually take on what leveraging your data that's in Databricks and the Unity data catalog, generate that first cut at taking that pipeline, make everybody more productive, and allowing novices to, and I'm not going to promise that 55%, but to get involved with what has been a process locked away in the data engineering. So if you go back to our original kind of concept, the data engineers are oversubscribed, business is blocked, we're trying to bring them together in a common platform. So what does this have? What kind of impact does this have on, sorry, I'm watching my time. What kind of impact does this have on a customer? And so I mentioned we're going to talk about one of our customers in wholesale banking and what they've done or what they're doing actually independent of us to think about this problem. So first of all, does anybody know about wholesale banking? Nobody? So you're going to believe everything I say? All right, one person. So the first thing is you should notice, although I did dress up like a banker, I don't actually work a lot in financial services, but I love working with our customers. So, and I was really pleased to learn about this. So in wholesale banking, it's not retail banking. It's not the stuff you go and you're getting a loan, you have your bank account. Wholesale banking is banking services packaged up and sold to other financial institutions, or the parts of corporations that act like financial institutions. And in that context, it's not just, like I said, what's on the shelf. There's a great deal of collaboration and customization. What are we working with now? How can we leverage the existing platforms? So kind of taking a step back, like many complex environments, nobody needs to build every part of it. You don't need the entire worldwide payment system. You can leverage that from an organization. And our customer happens to be one of the largest providers of this. So they have that piece of the puzzle, and then they want to bring that out. But how you tailor it and how you go that mile and actually make those services complete for the customer requires knowing your customer, collaborating with them, and driving a lot of innovation in that conversation. Not really straightforward, but a great place where data can make a big difference. They call it the front line is the customer interaction, and you think about it not just for making things more efficient, but for really bringing quality to the table. And that's kind of what's going on in the industry in general. So this is an article from McKinsey where James Bickerton, who's over at HSBC, is talking about what's happening in wholesale banking. And so the quote is kind of, hey, we're not just modernizing and automating efficiency. We're not just simplifying day-to-day tasks. That's good. We're making things better for people. But the real thrust of initiative is to equip the bankers, the frontline bankers, with tools to allow them to understand their customers and understand them holistically, allow them to understand what's actually happening so that they can have that conversation and move things forward. That's the kind of groundwork about having innovation in this space. And as we talked about, data is critically important. And so in this world of wholesale banking, it is truly big data. Probably, again, they could make the t-shirts up. We were big data before it was big. Because we're talking about massive amounts of data. In this, just one example, like 19 petabytes of available non-duplicated data. I want you to just kind of think about that for a minute. Sometimes when I give these talks, I would ask people, and maybe I'll try a little auction here. Who has more than 100 unique data sources? Couple people. Who has fewer than 100? The rest of you? Who has more than 500? Anybody? Okay, we're still going. All right, so when we keep on going into the thousands, are you going to go into the thousands? 5,000? Do I hear 5,000? When you get to those numbers, I can pretty confidently say, you, sir, are in banking. But maybe you're not in banking. But that's the kind of scale we're talking about. And I just went through that exercise because it's eye-opening to people who may not be familiar with banking, how much raw and unique data is generated, and how complex it is. So that diagram is a just kind of simple one about an instrument, but even one financial instrument has to touch all the parties that are involved with it. And when you really get into the regulatory aspects of this, you have to understand who those parties actually are. Are they a shell company for someone that's potentially a bad actor? or they shell company for a shell company for a shell company for a shell company that might be a bad actor. Now you really start layering on very, very complex data sets just to describe who's involved. And then it goes into the market, and now we're talking about its journey, time, price, the whole financial story over time. So time series, massive complexity. This is really, really rich data. And so the data teams here need to really work with it. They can't just have everybody work with it raw. They need to create what's known as data assets, collections of data that everybody can leverage downstream. And the data asset, kind of the highlight here, the data asset drives wholesale banking because with that reliable set, everybody can leverage it. Without it, everybody would have to reinvent the wheel, and you'd also have to reinvent the governance and the potential scrutiny that's coming after you make that decision. So there's a very critical aspect of not just the whole banking, but specifically in wholesale banking, and specifically in this part of the world where it's difficult to make the data asset. So the customer we're working with is getting out and starting off on this journey and realizing it's taking too long. 5 to 6 weeks lead time to get the data asset done. And that may not sound like a lot, but yeah, if you're thinking about a conversation where I teed it up, this is about collaboration with your customer in real time. You're on the phone, you're getting prepped for it, and can say, well, hold on, I got to get my data team. We're going to have to write a requirement for it. It starts to get old if you really need to do that for almost everything. But and obviously there's a resulting high cost, but most critically, it's just using too much of these valuable resources. The concept of transforming data, getting it out there, should not involve your most important resources. And they were just finding that was the reality, because this is what the kind of process looked like. So you have 3 kind of bands there, and the requesters are the folks who know the business, but they're not hands-on with the tools. And guess what? Excel is a tool of choice. Excel is a tool of choice to describe what you want. But then coming back in the testing phase, it's what you look at. Now, there's a middle layer, designer layer, that isn't necessarily highly skilled. Somebody can kind of speak both languages, and they're working in Python. It's Python. But they need to communicate back in Excel, and there's a lot of friction there. But what really is the problem is that layer is still just modeling and testing. And when you really want to make this thing go at the scale we're talking about, you need to go into the engineering layer. You need to have Scala properly distributed. We're really talking about really using the platform, and that's very expensive. And so that back and forth seems like okay until you get to the build, but in the testing is where it really hits, because there's a lot of back and forth up and down that whole stack. A lot of our customers talk about this phase where, okay, we told them what they wanted, they got the data set together, the data asset, we started proofing it, and it wasn't quite right not because nobody understood it, it's just the nuance wasn't there. Oh, I forgot that you need to do a geo slice when you're looking at this data, and it has to go all the way back through the whole stack. So that back and forth, subject matter experts, technical team is involving a lot of that time and effort. So when I talk about Prophecy, and I went through that whole thing about how we have an interface, we're putting AI in the picture, what we actually enable people to do is process change, tackle the problem in a different way. And this is that example. So with Prophecy, and they actually spec'd it as a tool that can do the stuff, and they found us, which is great. So people are thinking about this, solving this problem, and fortunately, we're able to come in with something that works. But in this environment, you still start off that way. But after that point, it's no longer, this is sounding funny. Okay. It's no longer just there's no longer a separation with Builder. You can actually collapse that layer, have people who are not necessarily the highest skill but can understand things, do the entire rest of the process. But most importantly is this, so there's elimination of the engineering resources, but reducing the back and forth with the visual. So visual is a great way for understanding things. And because when they create the pipeline, it's actually in an visual interface, even though it may be hard, maybe coded and may be engineered. And now the business can look at that and say, oh, you know what? There's no geo step here. My bad. And in this case, they can add it. They can now enable the business to start working in the tool and add the pieces that's missing. And that's because it's this kind of format we're talking about. I've been talking about how visual is really great, and I'm showing you like a diagram that's hard to understand. So this is the visual that makes it really great. When you're working in data, seeing it laid out this way, we call it a graph, seeing the process flow, it's immediately recognizable for the expert, but really importantly for the non-expert. And in the interface, you have everything you need to work with. You can go browse other people's pipelines, learn from them. You've got your canonical data sources. Again, we're talking, kind of in the middle of the process where things have been, where things have been managed well. But if you're the expert, you're really interested. Where is it going? You can open up any of this thing and or click over to the code view and see it. And finally, you kind of maybe can't see the bottom here. It's all going to Git. We're just integrating right into the engineering process as if you had that expert with you the whole way, but you don't need the expert. So that's the result. So we've got this kind of, this process change makes a big difference. So for this customer, reducing time to market, improving resource efficiency, the biggest thing there, that third bullet, near real-time review during build, that's the piece that they found really gets things going. And then, of course, we're actually generating the right Spark and scale of code. And when you go through this process, so in wholesale banking, we're talking about changing the game. You get kind of a step change in your results. So we've done first phase in this wholesale banking project. They had the goals of bringing in efficiency, unlocking the data, and I think we kind of over delivered. Where 55% reduction. You can do this either way you want to with these percentages. So 55% reduction, or it's 250% faster. But that's a dramatic change. Kind of having the amount of time it takes to do the pipeline development. But more importantly, because of the mix of the skill set involved, when you look at individual pipelines, it's also having the costs. So that's a nice thing to do because you're getting more data. You're changing the process. I don't want to just pretend like it's magic, but that's, getting more data, spending less per data. So ideally the result, and that's kind of what they saw, is that there's more data available. Same team, same cost profile can generate, that kind of bigger figure, 5, 10x. And that about matches for what we've seen with a lot of our other customers. So in wholesale banking, it's about making these data assets, creating this kind of critical instrument that's highly complex. Well, guess what? Supply chain logistics, same thing. Complex environments, suppliers, people, same kind of concept. Even out to some of our other customers in pharma and healthcare, it's a similar pattern. So, the other kind of soft benefits, though, are equally important. Lowering the barrier to entry into the field. So one of the things that's happening in data engineering is, again, that high barrier. Like, we need to onboard people, they come in, they have to have a high skill set. Well, it turns out when you have this set of visual, people can onboard faster, and you can bring in people with different skill sets and bring them into the process without having to have that high bar. And again, actually a little additional point about automated unit testing, because part of this process is actually controlling that. So that's kind of what we're up to at Prophecy, and that's an example from one of our customers in the banking world. But just to kind of round things out, that was our original vision, was that we can go into this hard area, data engineering, and make a big difference. And by putting together this tool that has the visual, embeds the artificial intelligence, and that last piece, it has to do with the DNA of the company. So I could say, oh, we have compiler technology, and just expect you to be like, oh yeah, of course you do. But that's actually how we work on this stuff. So when we talk about going from visual to code, we're not just building a one-time process. Our founders actually came out of the very, very hardcore part of NVIDIA writing assembly code with chips, in basically writing compilers to handle some of the most complex operations. And he looked up the stack and said, it's kind of a mess up there. There's people writing like Spark all over the place, and Scala's over here, and we can make a difference with this. And so he actually tackled the problem from that point of view, a very deep engineering point of view. And one of the artifacts from that is that we not only can go to visual to code, but we can go from code to code. So a lot of our customers have lots of business knowledge locked into other systems. And those pipelines I just talked for 25 minutes about pipeline creation process. There's a ton of very, very valuable information that gets captured. If it's in code, it's transportable, but it's very hard to understand. If it's in code if it's in a system that you can't actually use and see the code, it's not transportable, and that can be a problem for the future. So we actually use the same technology and work with something called a migration copilot to take some of these other pipelines, potentially thousands of pipelines, and move them up into the world of Spark. And one of our other co-founders has a great statement. It says, we're letting people make a move to code that they'll never have to move out of, because it's open source code that you own. And I think that's a great kind of, rounding out the story, because I could tell you how great Prophecy is all day long, but the reality is you're probably somewhere on your own journey, and we can help with that as well. And that's kind of our vision, is that the Transformation Copilot's there. It's for the data users. It's a layer on top, but really talking and tailoring itself to the people working with the tools. And then taking what we all know is this kind of like result of big data, the cloud data platforms, the complexity that's in them, and really allowing you to leverage it. So that's what we're about. I'm sorry. Yes. Turns out, banks are not alone. There are a lot of people that trust us. And it's great to work with people who have hard problems. And it's great to work with people who are interested in change. And so that's kind of our customer base at this moment. It may not mean a lot to you guys here, but we had a lot of fun with the Texas Rangers, who won the World Series in the United States. The World Series, the United States World Series, kind of weird. So that's always nice to talk about World Series data, but actually it's really the stories from any one of our teams that are going through this kind of change that make the difference. So I actually do have a minute if somebody has a question, but mostly we're here. We would love to hang out with you guys. We're having a great time at the show, and I want to continue the conversation. So yeah, I technically have a couple minutes if someone wants to chat, but otherwise I want to just say thank you and hope that was useful, and hopefully it was worth making the trip. So thank you. Can I get you guys to do a selfie with me? So I'm going to borrow a trick from a friend of mine. Can everybody go like this? Come on, put your hands. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. All right, awesome. So this is how you guarantee yourself a standing ovation. All right, thanks, guys. All right, we're around if you want to chat. Thanks.